said, I want to know what happened to me. A couple of things started to happen. I was injured. The swing changed. I had a short right leg, so the left hip used to get locked. I started searching for a new swing.
Ian Baker-Finch lifted the Claret Jug in 1991 and stood at the very top of the world, but his biggest mistake was already forming in the back of his mind, quiet and patient, waiting to take everything from him. Picture that moment at Royal Birkdale. The summer sun is out over the Lancashire coast. A tall, smooth-swinging Australian with an easy smile is walking up the 18th fairway with a two-shot lead and the kind of calm that most athletes spend their entire careers chasing and never find. He was 30 years old. He was ranked 10th in the world. And if this kind of deep storytelling is your thing, please go ahead and use the hype feature on this video right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people, and it takes 1 second. Now, back to Ian. Back to Birkdale. Because before we watch a man fall, we have to understand how high he was standing and exactly what it took to build him into the champion he was. He had just played the front nine of that final round in 29 strokes. 29. He was birdieing everything in sight, reading every green like a map drawn just for him, seeing the line on every putt like it was painted there in white on the grass. Not guessing, not hoping, seeing. He was 30 years old. He was ranked 10th in the world. He had already won 16 professional tournaments across 3 different tours on 3 different continents. He stood 6'4", with a lean frame that generated effortless leverage and a swing so smooth that watching it was closer to watching a musician than an athlete. He was known as the Dark Shark, a nickname born from pure respect for a man who moved through golf courses the way a predator moves through water. Silent, precise, lethal. The Claret Jug was his. Most people watching that Sunday afternoon at Royal Birkdale assumed they were watching the opening chapter of a Hall of Fame career, a champion in his prime who would go on to accumulate majors the way great players do when they are built the right way and in total command of their gifts. And everyone watching thought, without any real doubt at all, that this was just the beginning for Ian Baker-Finch. They were wrong. Not because of a bad injury, not because of a scandal, not because time arrived too early and stripped him of his physical gifts. What came next was worse than any of those things, and in many ways far harder to understand, because what came next was self-inflicted. The collapse of Ian Baker-Finch did not happen because the world did something to him. It happened because he made a choice, a quiet, private, completely understandable choice. A choice that felt logical in the moment and turned out to be catastrophic over the years that followed. And if you want to understand how one of the most beautiful swings in the history of professional golf simply stopped working on live television in front of galleries and cameras and millions of people watching around the world, then this story is for you, because this is that story. Ian Baker-Finch was born in Nambour, a small town in Queensland, Australia. He grew up on a farm. There was no golf academy nearby. There was no local teaching professional down the road. There was no video analysis, no launch monitor, no technical infrastructure of any kind. What there was a copy of Jack Nicklaus's book, Golf My Way, and a young kid with an extraordinary amount of patience and a deep, natural sense of physical movement. Baker-Finch would take that book outside, lay it open on the ground, hold the pages flat with golf clubs so the wind would not blow them shut, and then stand over the pictures and copy what he saw. He was not learning mechanics in a clinical sense. He was not memorizing positions like items on a checklist. He was feeling his way into a swing by watching someone else's and letting his own body find its version of it. He was building from the inside out, from instinct, from rhythm, from a deeply personal conversation between his hands and the club and the ball. That self-taught, feel-first foundation gave him something that cannot be manufactured on a practice green or generated on a computer screen. It gave him a swing that truly belonged to him. By 1991, that swing had been tested across thousands of rounds on 3 different tours, on 3 different continents, and it had become something genuinely special. At Royal Birkdale, it was operating at a level that made even his peers stop what they were doing and watch. His weekend scores of 64 and 66 are still referenced as one of the most clinical back-to-back performances in major championship history. He was not grinding through it. He was not scrapping and scrambling and making pars and hoping a leader would stumble. He was making birdies, one after another, with a quiet and confident rhythm that made the whole enterprise look inevitable. His final round front nine of 29 strokes was a statistical outlier, the kind of number you almost never see during the pressure of a major championship final day. He birdied 5 of the first 7 holes. He turned with a lead lead so comfortable that the tournament was, for all practical purposes, already over before anyone had reached the back nine. Sports psychologists have a phrase for what Baker-Finch was experiencing at Birkdale. They call it unconscious competence. It is the rarest and highest level of performance that a human being can reach in any skilled pursuit. It means you have done something so many times, so well, with so much genuine understanding of what you are doing and why, that your conscious mind no longer needs to be involved at all. The body simply knows. You do not think about the swing. You just swing. You do not analyze the putt. You just roll it. The part of the brain that produces doubt and fear and second guessing goes completely quiet. And in that silence, the body moves freely and automatically and beautifully, the way it has always wanted to move when the mind would just get out of the way. Baker-Finch described seeing a white line on every green, a glowing path leading from his ball straight to the bottom of the cup. He was not imagining this as some kind of motivational exercise. That is what peak confidence looks and feels like from the inside. The brain is so certain, so utterly comfortable with the task, that it processes visual information in a sharper, more vivid way. He could see the line, he trusted the line, he rolled the ball along the line, and it went in. He finished 2 strokes clear of Mike Harwood. He was 30 years old, 6'4", lean and powerful, and free in his movement, with a swing that coaches studied, rivals quietly envied, and commentators ran out of words to describe. The story of his career seemed already written. More majors, more titles, a gradual, graceful ascent into the kind of legend that the sport reserves for its very best. Instead, within 3 years, that same man would be standing frozen over a tee shot, unable to start his backswing. His ball would be flying out of bounds on the widest fairways in professional golf. He would shoot 82 with 10 penalty shots in a single round. He would miss 32 consecutive cuts on the PGA Tour. He would stand on the first tee at St. Andrews paired with Arnold Palmer and hook his opening drive out of bounds while his visor tumbled off his head in front of a gasping crowd. And he would eventually collapse to the floor of a locker room and weep for 45 minutes before effectively ending his career at 36. Every single piece of that nightmare, all of it traceable back to one moment, one decision, his biggest mistake. After Birkdale, Baker-Finch looked at the world around him and felt something that champions are not supposed to feel and rarely admit to. He felt insufficient, not because he had played badly, not because anyone had criticized his game. He felt insufficient because the game was changing in front of his eyes, and he was not sure his version of it would survive. In 1991, the same summer he lifted the Claret Jug, a big-hitting American named John Daly showed up at the PGA Championship at Crooked Stick as an unknown alternate who had barely made it there in time, and then hit drives so far beyond what his competitors were doing that golf writers genuinely struggled to find words that fit. Daly won. The galleries went absolutely wild. Television loved it. Distance was suddenly the thing. Raw, colossal, jaw-dropping distance was becoming the currency of the sport, and Baker-Finch, watching all of this with the eye of a champion who had just won the biggest prize in the game, began to feel the ground shift underneath his feet. He looked at Greg Norman, who was longer off the tee than him. He thought about the whispers growing louder around a young Tiger Woods, already being described as a talent who would change professional golf forever. He ran the numbers in his head and arrived at a conclusion that felt logical and urgent. He needed to add 15 to 20 yards off the tee. 15 to 20 yards. That was the target. That was the number he fixated on. That was the crack in the foundation from which every subsequent disaster would eventually grow. When you change what made you great, you also change what you can trust. He started lifting weights, seriously and intensively, with genuine dedication to building a more powerful and explosive physique. He was not cutting corners, he was giving it everything he had. The problem was that transforming your body physically does not automatically translate into a better golf swing. Decades later, Bryson DeChambeau would demonstrate that this kind of transformation is possible, adding massive muscle mass and genuinely increasing his driving distance. But DeChambeau had a full team working alongside him, biomechanics experts and data analysts and equipment engineers, all collaborating to ensure that the new physical power was being correctly integrated into the swing. Baker-Finch had none of that support structure. He was doing it alone, guided by instinct, which had served him brilliantly his whole life, but could not alone bridge the technical gap between a stronger body and a swing capable of reliably converting that strength into extra usable distance. He changed changed his equipment. He moved away from the heavier clubs he had always used, the ones that gave him rich, constant, detailed feedback on every single shot. He moved toward lighter, more modern equipment designed to generate higher swing speeds. Those clubs swung faster and looked promising in theory. But for a player built entirely on feel, equipment feedback is not a nice bonus. It is the architecture of the whole system. A feel player reads the club the way a musician reads an instrument. Every tiny vibration in the grip tells the hands something useful. Every slight variation in the sound of a strike contains information that the hands use to make the micro adjustments that keep the swing honest. When Baker-Finch switched to lighter clubs, he lost that conversation. The clubs were moving faster and speaking more quietly, and the information his body had always relied on was no longer arriving. Then came the coaching. He sought help from some of the best teachers in the world: David Leadbetter, Gary Edwin, Hank Haney, Rick Smith. Every single one of them was a serious and genuinely skilled instructor who had helped elite players solve real problems. But Baker-Finch was not working through a single coherent system with one consistent voice. He was collecting information from multiple sources and trying to stack it all together into something workable. Each coach added something. Each session introduced new positions, new checkpoints, new swing thoughts, new triggers to manage over the ball. And the mental list grew longer and longer until, by the time he stood over a tee shot, there was simply no room left for what had always made him special. No room left for feel. No room left for the quiet, automatic trust of a man who learned the game by watching a book on the ground in Queensland. He had gone from unconscious competence, where nothing needed thinking about, to a state where everything needed thinking about simultaneously, and the thinking itself had become the obstacle. The more he searched for the perfect move, the less his body knew what move to make. Leadbetter saw what was happening before most. He told Baker-Finch clearly that his long game was already fine, and that the obsession with distance was going to cost him everything. That warning was direct, and it was accurate, and it came from one of the most experienced eyes in professional instruction. But by the time it was delivered, Baker-Finch's mind was already too deep inside the chase to hear it properly. The warning arrived too late, or perhaps too early, before the full consequences had made themselves visible in a way that felt undeniable. He had started running towards something that kept moving, and the further he ran, the more confused he became about what he had been running toward in the first place. The original target, those 15 to 20 yards, became less of a goal and more of an obsession, and obsessions have a way of consuming the thing they were supposed to improve. The technical consequences arrived fast. The most visible and frightening was the development of what players call a two-way miss. To understand why this is so devastating in professional golf, you need to understand how elite players manage imperfection. No professional golfer hits every shot perfectly. The difference between great players and average players is not that great players miss less. It is that great players miss in consistent, predictable ways. If your bad shot typically drifts slightly left, you aim a fraction to the right and factor the miss into your game plan. The miss is absorbed without much damage because you saw it coming. But Baker-Finch lost that predictability entirely. His new swing, with its higher hand position and steeper attack angle, created a situation where the ball could hook violently 50 yards left or slice wildly 50 yards right, with no advance warning and no detectable pattern to explain which was coming on any given swing. Johnny Miller, one of the sharpest and most articulate observers the game has produced, watched Baker-Finch from the commentary booth during this period and used the phrase wide spray. It is a simple phrase and it captures the horror precisely. Wide spray means you cannot pick a target and commit to it, because committing requires the belief that your swing will send the ball in the general direction of that target, and Baker-Finch had stopped believing that. He stood on tee boxes and aimed somewhere and then hit the ball and watched it go somewhere completely different, and there was nothing he could do about it because he had no idea which kind of miss was coming. The tee box, which at Birkdale in 1991 had been the starting point of a beautiful sequence, the first step of a controlled and confident performance, had become a place of dread. He dreaded the walk to the tee. He dreaded the moment of standing over the ball. He dreaded the swing. And dreading the swing is about the worst starting point there is for a professional golfer trying to hit a driver under competitive pressure. In his attempt to find the answer, he hit more balls. more and more balls every day. By 1994, he was hitting at least 100 drives per day on the practice range, grinding through volume, searching for the feeling he had lost. But practicing a flawed motion repeatedly does not fix the flaw. It makes the flaw more automatic. It engraves the bad pattern deeper into the body's movement memory until the bad pattern becomes the thing the body reaches for by default under pressure. Every one of those 100 daily drives was reinforcing the problem and drilling it further in. The physical cost was serious too. His shoulders deteriorated under the strain of the more aggressive swing. His feet developed problems as well, almost certainly from the increased torque his body was generating through the hitting zone. He was hurting physically while coming apart mechanically, and the two processes were feeding each other. Once the ball can go anywhere, your mind starts guarding you from swinging at all. And that is what happened. The fear Baker-Finch developed was not the ordinary pre-shot nerves that sharpen a player's focus on the first tee of a big tournament. This was categorically different. This was a full-body paralysis. He would stand over the ball, club in hand, and his brain would simply stop. He could not start the backswing. He could not get the motion going. His body had executed this movement more times than he could count, and now, under the accumulated weight of fear and mechanical confusion and public expectation, it refused. This condition has a clinical name. It is called focal dystonia. In plain language, it means a misfiring in the brain's motor signals, where the commands that should produce a smooth, trained, automatic movement get scrambled somewhere between the brain and the muscles. It is not weakness of character. It is not a failure of toughness. It is a genuine neurological problem that can strike elite performers in any field. And for a professional golfer, it means every tee shot becomes a public ordeal. He admitted that he had lost his confidence so completely that he did not even want to be out on the golf course. A man who had taught himself to play by lying a book on the ground in Queensland because he loved the game that much no longer wanted to be on a golf course. That tells you everything about how deep the damage ran. And the scorecards told the story in numbers. Between 1,994 and 1,997, a man who had been top 10 inches the world and had won a major championship at 30 years of age missed 32 consecutive cuts on the PGA Tour, 32 in a row. In 1995 and 1996 combined, across 29 PGA Tour events, he made 0 cuts. He missed the cut, withdrew after 1 round, or was disqualified in every single event across 2 full years. He was averaging close to 4 penalty shots per round, nearly all of them from hooks so violent they crossed out of bounds markers. At the 1,994 World Series of Golf at Firestone, he shot an 82 that included 10 penalty shots and 21 putts. Stop and sit with that number for a moment. 10 penalty shots. In a single round of professional golf, on a course he had played many times, at an event he was supposed to belong in, he accumulated 10 separate penalty strokes. Each one was a hook that flew over a boundary line. Each one was a moment where the ball simply did not go where a human being at his level of experience should have been able to send it. By the time he arrived at the 18th hole that day, he was playing his last ball. He had started the round with a full bag of golf balls and had used every single one of them up through 17 holes. He had run out. A former Open champion had run out of golf balls at a PGA Tour event. That single sentence contains the full magnitude of what was happening to him. Not a slump, not a rough patch. A complete and total unraveling happening in public, week after week, in front of galleries and cameras and fellow professionals who could not look away. The media saw it and went after him. The man once celebrated for his warmth and his easy Australian charm became material. They called him Ian Baker-Finch. A mocking play on his name that pointed directly at the flinch, the fear, the frozen hesitation that had replaced the flowing and authoritative motion the world had watched win at Birkdale. It cut. He knew it cut every time he saw it in print. He responded the way he had always responded to difficulty, with humor and grace and a generous willingness to let people laugh without making them feel cruel. He joked that he was winning Father of the Year because he was home with his family every single weekend. The joke landed. It always did. But behind it was a man who felt genuinely demeaned. A man who was walking out week after week to do the thing he had given his life to and playing it so poorly in front of thousands of people that his own name had become a punchline in the newspapers of the sport he had once conquered. And the Open Championship, the place that had crowned him, became the place that warned the world. In 1995 at St. Andrews, paired with Arnold Palmer playing in his final Open Championship, Baker-Finch walked to the first tee of the Old Course. The first hole at St. Andrews has the widest fairway in professional golf. The fairway is shared with the 18th hole coming back in the other direction. The space is so vast, so generously wide, that hitting it out of bounds there is not something elite players do. It simply does not happen at that level. It is the kind of thing that happens in anxious dreams, not in reality, not on the opening hole of the Open Championship in front of a full gallery and a watching world. Baker-Finch stood on that tee and hit a duck hook so violent, so completely and catastrophically offline that it crossed the boundary fence on the left side of the shared fairway and went out of bounds. The gallery gasped. Not in the polite way that galleries sometimes respond to a mishit. They gasp the way people gasp when they see something that should not be physically possible. And during the downswing, his visor tumbled from his head and spun away through the air and landed somewhere in the grass. It was a small thing in isolation, just a hat falling off. But the image was so precise and so visual and so perfectly symbolic that it stayed in people's memories long after the specifics of the round were forgotten. He had lost control of the ball, of the swing, of the whole fragile architecture of a career that had once looked so sturdy. He missed the cut at the home of golf 4 years after winning at Birkdale. 2 years later, the story reaches its cruelest scene. The 1997 Open Championship at Royal Troon. Baker-Finch had not played a competitive tournament in 1996. He had spent that year in a kind of voluntary exile, resting his body, trying to let the noise in his head settle down, staying away from competition and cameras and scorecards. He needed time away from the thing that had been destroying him. He came to Troon in 1997 with no firm plan to play. He was there to be near the tournament, near the friends and peers he had spent his career alongside. His friends convinced him to try. They made the case that the links environment, the sea breeze, the natural ground game, the different feel of an open week might unlock something. Maybe the old rhythm was still in there somewhere, waiting for the right conditions to come back. Maybe Troon would be different. He agreed to play. He walked to the first tee with Todd Woodbridge beside him. Woodbridge was a tennis legend, one of the greatest doubles players the sport had ever produced, and he was there as a friend and caddy, willing to walk whatever road came next with someone he cared about. It was a generous and gentle thing to do, and what followed was one of the most painful single rounds of golf ever played at a major championship in the modern era. On the opening hole, he repeated St. Andrews. The hook flew off the face and went out of bounds before many people in the gallery had even properly settled in to watch his first tee shot of the Open Championship. Out of bounds. He made his way forward, took his penalty, found the fairway, tried to keep playing, tried to keep going, tried to find somewhere inside himself the steady and authoritative ball striker who had walked this same stage 6 years earlier and made it look effortless, but the well was dry. He fought through the front nine, but the round was unraveling systematically and completely, one hole at a time, one bad tee shot at a time, one penalty at a time. He made 6 double bogeys across the card, each one a small collapse within the larger collapse. On the 16th hole, his drive went out of bounds again, a triple bogey 7, and then he came to the 18th hole needing to hit a standard 60-yard wedge shot onto the green. Any golfer at any level plays this shot dozens of times a week. It is routine. It is the kind of shot Baker-Finch had hit 10,000 times over his career, but in that moment at Royal Troon after the round he had just endured, he could not face it. The fear of shanking it sideways, of sending the ball flying off the hosel at a 90-degree angle in front of the gallery and the cameras and the watching world, was so total and so paralyzing that he quietly put the wedge back in the bag. He pulled out an 8-iron, and he bunted the ball along the ground onto the green, keeping it close to the earth, keeping it safe, keeping it invisible. He signed for a 92 plus 21. A former Open champion had just shot 92 at his own championship. He walked to the champions room with Jenny, his wife, and with Woodbridge. The champions room is for former winners. It is a place of honor, a room where the names on the walls are the names of the greats. He had a right to be there. He had earned the right to be there 6 years earlier with a 64 and a 66 and a claret jug raised over his head in the Lancashire sun. But on this day, the room was a sanctuary of a different kind. The door closed, the cameras stayed outside, the world stayed outside, and Ian Baker-Finch collapsed to the floor and wept. He lay in the fetal position and cried for 45 minutes. Not a few tears, not a quiet moment of private frustration, 45 minutes of weeping, All of it came out at once. 6 years of walking to tee boxes with fear sitting in his chest like a cold stone. 6 years of reading his own name used as a joke in the press. 6 years of smiling for cameras and making people laugh with self-deprecating humor while being quietly disassembled from the inside. 6 years of trying everything, coaches and equipment and 100 drives a day and physical transformation, and watching all of it fail. The dam broke in that room. Everything he had been holding together through sheer force of personality and grace and humor came apart in one long, private, devastating cry. He withdrew from the championship that afternoon. And at 36 years old, in what should have been the most productive decade of his career, Ian Baker-Finch retired from professional tournament golf. What separates this story from most sporting downfalls is how the people around him responded. Baker-Finch was not a difficult person. He was not arrogant or prickly or prone to making enemies. He was one of the genuinely warm, well-liked figures on the PGA Tour, a man whose grace under enormous pressure was noted by everyone who observed it. When Nick Faldo saw his struggles, Faldo tried to help. Nick Faldo, who was not known as the most emotionally open person on the tour, made time. He saw a peer suffering and he responded with generosity. When Seve Ballesteros, 5-time major champion and one of the most perceptive and emotionally intelligent players who ever lived, saw what was happening to Baker-Finch, he spent hours on the driving range with him. Hours. Trying to find the right key, trying to help him reconnect with something. They gave their time without being asked. They did it because they cared about him and because they could see the pain. But golf, at the moment of truth, is a game of solitary confinement. No one can swing the club for you. No one can reach into your nervous system and reconnect the signals that have come loose. Every friend and every coach in the world can surround you on the practice range, and the moment you step onto the first tee, you are alone again, completely and absolutely alone, with the ball, with the boundary stakes, with a crowd watching from all sides, with the memory of everything that has gone wrong replaying somewhere in the back of your mind. His peers watched in something close to horror, not because they looked down on him, but because they recognized in his collapse the exact thing they feared most about their own relationship with the game. They saw that it can happen to anyone, that the swing you trust most deeply can become a stranger without warning, that nothing is permanent, nothing is safe, that the most dangerous opponent any champion ever faces is the one that lives inside their own mind. The lesson at the center of this story is not complicated, but living it is another matter entirely. Baker-Finch had something real and rare. A swing built entirely on feel, assembled by a self-taught kid on a farm in Queensland who had no coaches, no academies, no systems, just a book on the ground and a gift for rhythm. That swing took him to the top of the world. It won him the Open Championship. It gave him a top 10 world ranking and 16 professional titles. And then he looked at what the sport was beginning to reward, the big distances, the power game, the yards on the radar gun, and he decided his version of greatness was not enough. He decided he needed more. In chasing that more, he dismantled the very thing that had built him. He reached into the engine that had carried him to Birkdale and tried to rebuild it into something bigger, and found that the bigger version did not work and the original could never quite be assembled the same way again. Chasing perfection and power can destroy the thing you already had. That sentence should be written somewhere visible in every locker room and practice facility in the world, in every field where performance matters, and the temptation to become something more can quietly become the decision that costs you everything you already were. Every single step of Baker-Finch's disaster traces back to the same source, one quiet decision, one understandable, well-intentioned thought that formed in the mind of a new champion standing at the highest point of his career. The thought that said, quietly and convincingly, I need more. He had a Claret Jug. He had a top 10 world ranking. He had 16 wins across 3 tours. He had a swing that coaches admired and rivals envied. And he looked at all of that and decided it was not enough. He decided that 15 to 20 yards of additional distance was the missing piece that would make him complete. In chasing those yards, he dismantled the rhythm that had produced everything. He broke open the engine that had carried him to Birkdale and tried to rebuild it into something bigger, and found that the bigger version did not work and the original could never be assembled quite the same way again. That thought cost him the rest of his playing life. The pursuit of 15 to 20 extra yards cost him the career those yards were supposed to protect. Today, Ian Baker-Finch is one of the most respected voices in golf broadcasting anywhere in the world. He spent years working for CBS Sports in America, becoming a familiar and trusted presence for millions of golf fans who watch major championships and tour events from their living rooms. He is known for his empathy, his technical depth, and his remarkable ability to explain what is happening in a swing or inside a player's head in a way that clicks for everyone listening, whether they have been playing for 30 years or 30 days. He understands the game from the inside in a way that most broadcasters simply cannot match because he has lived both the heights and the depths of it. He turned his years of pain into something useful. He took what had been the most humiliating and lonely period of his professional life and extracted from it a richness of understanding that he now shares openly and generously with anyone who will listen. He rebuilt himself. He found a way back to the game he loves, on different terms with a different role, but with something the 1991 version of himself lifting the Claret Jug at Birkdale could not have possessed. He had lived through the worst thing that can happen to a craftsman, the loss of the craft itself in public without explanation, without a clear path back. And on the other side of that experience, he found a way to make it mean something. He became someone who could help others understand not just how to win, but what the loss of a gift teaches you about yourself and how you carry that knowledge forward into a life that still has real purpose and real value. If you are an athlete, a performer, or simply someone who has worked hard to become genuinely good at something, his story carries a warning worth keeping and a lesson worth returning to anytime the pressure to do more, to be more, starts to build. Trust what you have built. Trust the feel you have developed across years of honest and patient work. Trust the rhythm that carried you to where you are today. The danger is not in standing still. The danger is in deciding, after your best moment, after your Claret Jug moment, that your best was not quite enough. If this story resonated with you, please like the video and subscribe so you never miss one of these deep dives. Drop a comment below and tell us what you think about what happened to Ian Baker-Finch and whether his story changed the way you think about your own pursuit of improvement. We read every single comment. Thank you for being here and for watching.